Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We're going to be taking a look at Nexus and the sales tax puzzle. A little bit about SIS as we get started. SIS was founded in 1996. We're headquartered in Duluth, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. And Strategic Industry Solutions delivers business solutions that help project and service-driven companies unify business processes and applications across the enterprise, thus delivering better visibility and efficiency. SIS has a wide range of services that we offer: current state assessments, business process analysis, requirements, fit gap analysis, software design, development, and deployment, custom application development, ERP and CRM implementation, and rapid deployments for hub and spoke rollouts, and on-premise or cloud deployments for Microsoft Dynamics SL, CRM, and Dynamics 365. A little bit of housekeeping as we get started. If you have any issues, audio, video, email us at info@SISN and we'll get you helped out. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end. If you do think of any questions before we get to the end, go ahead and put those in the question box. You'll view it best today in full screen mode, and we're going to record this webinar and send out the presentation tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out in your inbox. We want to let you know that the Dynamics user group is now Microsoft Community Summit, and we're going to be having an in-person event in Houston in October this year, and you can get $100 off your registration using our discount code DSL100OFF, and we'll send a little bit more information about that out as the details become available. But we're very excited to have in-person conferences back and to get the Dynamics community together. And I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mark Rowe. He's going to be presenting for Avalara's portion of presentation today.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. You guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. So, Eric, thanks for inviting us to present to your group today. We're going to be talking about Nexus today. So, there's been a lot of changes in regards to that and sales tax. And so let's kind of dive into that. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've been with Avalara for a little over 7 years now, and I've worked with both current and prospective customers. So I've talked with thousands of clients over that time in trying to help them navigate and automate sales and use tax. And even though I've been talking sales tax for over 7 years, it's really just something that even if you do it all the time, you're never going to know everything. So having partners in place, just like working with SIS to help you with your SL needs, it's definitely important to have somebody to lean on as it relates to sales and use tax. I'm hailing right now from the Seattle area, from my dining room table. So look forward to sharing with you today. So what are we going to talk about? So first and foremost, we're going to just talk about the current landscape that is, sales tax. For some of you, that also may be use tax. So we can talk a little bit about that as well. What are the challenges and what's changed over the last 3 years? And what are some ways to get you compliant? So, why is sales tax, complex? Well, there's a number of things here, right? So a lot of things have changed just in the last 3 years as it relates to your Nexus. So not only do you have your physical presence, meaning where your offices are located, or people, or your inventory, but now, since the Wayfair ruling from June of 2018, there's now this concept of economic nexus, and we'll go into a little more detail there. But it just compounds your responsibility to keep track of where should I be collecting and filing in as it relates to where should I register for Nexus for sales and use tax. Things are changing all the time too. So even in the states you're currently in, some of the rules as it relates to product and service taxability are changing, rates change, jurisdictions change in terms of boundaries. So there's a lot of things to keep up on, and it makes it tougher when you're doing it manually, to keep up to date on those things. And what I'm finding in the marketplace right now is people's Nexus are expanding quite a bit. So the time and effort that maybe you were comfortable with what you were doing over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it's changing enough to where being able to keep up and do it yourself is really cost prohibitive. You know, and unfortunately, you can't just skip tax, right? I mean, it's just like anything else, death and taxes, you have to deal with it. So you can't just put your head in the sand and not confront it. So the issue with anything with taxes is a pass-through activity, meaning you have to keep up to date on it. You have to know, how to do your own taxes. And whether you've tripped Nexus or not. And the states are going to hold you accountable whether you're educated or not. So what we've seen, especially in the last 3 years, is there's been a lot more inquiries from other states because of the economic nexus, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But also a lot of clients are getting letters because of who they do business with, meaning maybe one of your vendors has been audited, and now they see that you could be a target for an audit. So those are things to watch out for and things to plan for, and know, like, when was the last time I checked my Nexus? What am I going to do if I go from being in 3 states to being in 15 states? So we can talk a little bit more about that later. And then just the overall, like, hey, should I have been in a state several years ago? So Wayfair is now 3 years in, so could I potentially have some back liabilities? Now fortunately, with the Wayfair ruling and economic nexus, the Supreme Court really ruled that it's on a go forward basis, but there could be some back liabilities if you may have triggered it in years past, since it's been implemented in the states that started out right away. So, why should we be worrying about this right now? Well, a lot of things we had talked about. So, most state budgets are built on sales and use tax. It's usually, statistically, it makes up about half of their revenue. And, believe it or not, I think most states would say they don't collect what they should, right? So, for example, I'm here in Washington State. Before COVID, when you go down to Oregon and buy a bunch of things, I didn't actively, search out the Washington State website, because there's no sales tax in Oregon, and try and remit, the use tax on those purchases I made while I was out of state. That doesn't happen. And similarly, when you talk about, businesses, although they want to keep tabs on all the companies that sell into their state, it's a pretty wide net to try and get all around. So, but when you are found out, you don't want to be caught flat-footed. So the other thing is, there's a lot of changes that are happening in the marketplace that people may need to look at. Hey, do I have different nexus? So we call these trigger events. So a lot of it can be mergers, acquisitions. What we saw a lot of at Avalara here is last year we saw a lot of manufacturers and distributors go direct to consumer because their distribution outlets were slowing down and stores were closed. So they started, going direct to consumer via a shopping cart or on their website. So what are the implications when you start selling direct to your clients if maybe most of your sales are exempt? So those are things to consider as well. So one thing to keep in mind is, the physical nexus triggers are always that have been in place since the Quill ruling in the early 90s are still there, right? So do I have inventory? Am I drop shipping? Multi-offices? Do I travel in to those states? Do I use contractors to travel into states? There's a bevy of different things as it relates to physical nexus that are still out there. So just remember that it's not just economic nexus. Those triggers and what your business activities could have triggered physical nexus and you didn't know it. So it's always good to do a risk assessment and understand, hey, did I trip anything as it relates to physical nexus? So then we turn the page to the economic nexus. So if you look at this map here, just about every state that has sales tax, Missouri and Florida being the only ones right now that don't have anything active on the books. I believe Missouri might be implementing something here shortly, but anything blue has an economic nexus threshold. So what does that mean? So rather than just do I have physical nexus through the Wayfair ruling, Wayfair versus South Dakota ruling by the Supreme Court in 2018, essentially it validated that if you sell a certain amount of goods and services into a state, it would require you to then register to then file and collect tax going forward in that state. And as you can see on the right-hand side here, it varies, right? A lot of people copied the South Dakota law, which was $100,000 worth of tax or 200 unique transactions. And then some of the larger states like California, Texas, it's up to $500,000. And then there's everywhere in between, as it relates to where you could trip nexus there. And then other common triggers, right? So we had talked about mergers, acquisitions. So those can change your economic nexus, right away as well. I'd also mentioned, hey, I'm starting to sell direct to consumer. That can also build towards, how much you're selling in a state can trigger, hey, I need to now start to register, to file and remit in those states. So typically what I also find though is a lot of people are come to me and they say, hey, look, most of my sales exempt, I don't really need to worry about that. Well, that's not really the case. And here's what I'll say is the majority of states, over 60% of the states count wholesale or distribution sales via exemption towards your threshold. So you may be triggering in states and you didn't think you had to worry about. The other piece of the puzzle there too is when auditors come to look and audit you, the first few things that they really hone in on, and again, there may be some people in this audience today that have been through an audit. A lot of times where they're going to really look hard at is your exemption certificates and your use tax. So let's talk a little bit about those exemption certificates. So if you don't have a good process to not only collect and manage those, it's going to be difficult as it relates to economic nexus to keep up, right? Because as you grow into more states, the factor of the number of exemption certificates you're going to be needing to collect is going to exponentially go up. So let's look at some of those scenarios. So in the case of, say I'm only in a manufacturer in New York right now, most of my sales are exempt because, I'm just a reseller and I collect exemption certificates for all the products that I, sell right now. Well, if I'm moving from, say one state to multiple states, and I only had, New York exemptions on file, in this case it's 75, it could be a scenario where I could need over 1,000 certificates if I'm moving into most states, going forward. Same with a wholesaler, right? So if you were doing drop shipping, it's a fair assumption now that because of those drop ships, those will feed into your threshold of how much you're shipping and selling into a state, to then require you to collect more certificates from your customers. So that's another exponential increase in how many documents you need to manage. So those are the things to keep in mind. The other thing too is not all certificates are created equal. So there are some states that will take a multi-state form, and some of those expire never. There's also ones that they don't recognize other state forms, and you need to provide the state that that you're selling into the customer their corresponding state certificate, and needs to be filled out properly. So being able to not only collect that, but manage it in such a way where you have it at the ready if needed in an audit. It can be more cumbersome moving from one state to 15, 20, 46 states. So then on the flip side, now you could have to calculate more states. You could have to collect more certificates based on an increase in your Nexus. Now I also have to do all the filings. So how do I go about making sure and keeping on top of that? Where it also can get complicated, and maybe we have some clients on the phone right now that are in the great states of, say, Colorado, Louisiana, Alabama. There are also some states that require you to file local returns. So rather than you just send and remit everything to the state and they waterfall everything down to the counties and the cities, you have to then also register for county specific returns and city specific returns. So those are things to consider as your Nexus grows as well, depending on whether it's economic or physical Nexus. So how are you guys going to keep up to date on, hey, I need to know my filing frequency. Do I need to file via paper or online format? And what are the deadlines? They're all a little bit different. So you're going to have to kind of juggle, the time preparation mixed with, the calendar, right? Everyone's a little bit different. Some are earlier in the month, some are later in the month, and then right in the middle. So having to juggle that. And then if there's any inquiries back from the states, if you only had one, that's not a big deal. But if you're now in 15 to 20, it can get a little messy in a heartbeat. So what are some of the things that automation can do to reduce that burden? So, we have a couple, different ways that can assist there, right? So things like the returns we're just talking about, automating those repetitive tasks in terms of filling out and remitting returns. Tax calculation. So rather than having to research, build tax rate tables and maintain those, that can be automated through a web service call. And then, other things like being able to keep up to date on tax rule changes. So being able to glean that data from state websites and be able to push it out to through solutions to keep you up to date versus you having to pay somebody to do that research and get it updated on a less frequent basis. And then just kind of the overall, more things are going to be, pushed to the cloud as it relates to sales tax. So there's expected growth there, from last year and beyond. So what does our compliance suite look like? So here's kind of like a really high level kind of look at all the things that we can help in the suite of products that we offer. For the audience we have today, I mean, we have a pre-built integration for Dynamics SL, as well as it shows here, over 1,000 different integrations. So if you have other shopping carts or things like that, it's very likely that we already have a pre-built integration there. So being able to plug into the systems you need right now and calculate those, we'll be able to do that upon your behalf. On the flip side, now that we have all your transactional data, it makes it very easy for us to file and remit those sales and use tax returns upon your behalf. We have document management as it relates to certificate management. So not just a warehouse or a digital filing cabinet, but a true, it talks directly with our tax engine to know, is this customer exempt in the state that you're selling to in this specific sale? And then also giving you the reporting and feedback to know, is that certificate coming up for expiration? And then also giving you a way to actually collect those certificates. So sending out requests directly to your clients via email, snail mail, or even fax, if you guys still have one of those. And then being able to have a feedback loop to get that certificate back, validate, hey, it was signed and it looks valid. And then we also offer managed services around that. So say you don't have the staff to do that, we can actually do that upon your behalf as well. We do offer registrations. This also flows towards not only your sales and use tax registrations, we can do licensing registrations. We also have license management on top of that. So if you have quite a few, whether it be contractor license, vehicle licenses, so we're truly that compliance suite. And then we also provide things like, as it relates to insights, if you have a very complex product or service that you offer and you need information on, is it taxable or not, we can even give you a library and access to tax professionals that can answer questions just on the product and service taxability. Say, for example, you're in construction or things that have very complicated tax policies state by state. There are plenty of content that we can offer to you. And then you could also ask tax professionals questions and get that information back within 24 hours. So another advantage to actually partnering with Avalara is there's a program called Streamlined Sales Tax. Avalara is actually a certified provider of Streamlined Sales Tax. And this initiative between these 24 participating states actually grew out of the late 90s, kind of the early .com first wave of e-commerce .com boom, if you will. And what they really were trying to do is just what we talked about earlier. They wanted to get revenues to increase because of the fact that most of these e-commerce sites did not have physical presence. They wanted to get their piece of the pie. So what they did was they came together, and through certified providers like Avalara, if you were truly selling remotely, they would allow you to register in the state through an application at no cost. And now you can selectively choose. So as your economic nexus changes, you can selectively choose which states you have to go into based on your requirements. And then the other benefit is and then they put us through a vetting process. So we have to vet that our calculation is correct, the returns are correct, and that we're also managing the certificate information correctly. So every information that we're passing, it's done correctly. And one of the benefits is if you have less than 50,000 in payroll or inventory or total property within those states, the states will actually pay for the calculation and the returns upon your behalf, as long as you're using a certified vendor like Avalara. So we've seen a huge, tremendous growth in number of clients that are utilizing and taking advantage of this program, because of the fact that just by partnering with Avalara, you can get those benefits at no cost as long as you qualify as a voluntary seller. And definitely keep up to date. So for example, Avalara, just our Avalara website, and again, we can expose more information, but just going to avalara.com, we actually have tons of resources. So just, hey, I want to find out what are the thresholds in all the states. We have all that online. We have industry insights that are available. We just had, so once a year, we actually have a huge kind of sales and use tax conference called Crush, and those are available to all of our customers, and we do it once a year. This was the first year we did it virtually, but typically we pick a very awesome location that you can come to, and there's fun events, but there's tons of resources, whether it be sales and use tax specialists, technology resources, or just our internal resources that can share with you, things to be aware of, new technologies that are available, etc. So there's quite a few things that we do to keep you guys educated. So with that, I will turn it back over to Eric, but I really appreciate your time and taking a few minutes to just talk further about sales and use tax and how Nexus may affect you. With that, Eric, if there's any questions that were put during the call, I'd love to answer those. So I'll hand it back to you, and happy to answer those questions.
Thanks, Mark. It does look like we've had some questions come in. The first one is, does physical presence still factor in post-Wayfair?
Absolutely. So, and that was one of the points I was trying to make, is you don't want to not think about, okay, it's just economic nexus. Some of your business activities still apply. So if you've been in business for many, many years, you just want to make sure any of your activities over that time period didn't trigger Nexus even prior to economic nexus. We offer risk assessments, so we can definitely do some looking into that for you through our tax advisory team, and give you a tool to help you understand, could I have tripped Nexus physically versus just economic nexus over the last 3 years? Good question.
Okay, thank you. The next one is, how does Avalara calculate and file for free in states where I trigger economic nexus?
Yeah, so that was so that goes back to the Streamlined Sales Tax initiative. So because we're a certified vendor, as long as you qualify as a voluntary remitter, meaning kind of you basically don't have physical nexus, whether it be real property or 50,000 worth of payroll inventory, you can actually sign up for that piece of our solutions, and the states will essentially compensate you in those 24 participating states where you would qualify and you would get those services for free. One thing that I've seen, and definitely we can talk with any of your customers offline, is I've typically seen where the compliance costs go down about 30 to 40% just by taking those SST states out. But it's also the peace of mind of, it does give you audit protection as well. So what that means is, if one of those SST states had an inquiry, they would actually come to us first because we're the certified provider. They would still include you in the conversation, but we're kind of on the hook as it relates to those calculation of returns. So kind of on that go forward basis, anything that we've calculated as part of that SST program we would give you audit protection.
Okay. We have another one. How difficult is automation to implement and set up with SL? We are a small business and my firm does not have a lot of staff time to dedicate to tech support.
That's a great question. So the benefit to you is our integrations are pre-built. And so our go live team would help get that up and running. So you won't have to be a technology expert. Typically our implementations are measured more in hours versus months. But I will say again, as a controller or accounting manager or an operations manager, I get it. You guys have your own job. So you're going to have to implement this at your own pace to also get the rest of your job done. So I've seen typical implementations take between 30 to 60 days. The technology piece is actually probably the easiest part. And what I mean by that is, you're just putting in your company information, you're flagging which states you need to collect in. If we're doing returns for you, you're building out that, we call it filing calendars, but just telling us your filing frequency, your account information so that we can do that for you. That's very easy. Where it can vary is, and just like any implementation of a software is, you want to make sure you test it and you feel comfortable that once you put it in the production environment, that it's gone through its paces and that it's ready to go. So again, we also provide sandbox environments so you can run test transactions through prior to going live so that you feel comfortable with what you're getting in terms of that. So you don't have to be a technology expert. We're there to help you. The solution itself is not rocket science, and we're here to assist as well. And then just kind of the onus would be on you to make sure you've tested enough to feel like, okay, we got this, and once we flip the switch, it's going to do it exactly as we expect it to.
Okay. Looks like the last question we have is, I use Amazon for fulfillment, Amazon FBA, but am only registered in 2 states. No shopping cart either. Is there anything I should know about that program?
Yeah, so one thing to consider with Amazon, and I've gotten a lot of this, especially with COVID, where people are starting to distribute through different avenues. Specifically with fulfillment by Amazon, it really comes back to Nexus. And what I mean by that is, since they're warehousing your product, you have to basically assume that it could be in any of their warehouses nationwide. So the implication there is I could have Nexus everywhere. Now, again, you want to assess like what's the true risk, right? Like how much product how much products are we selling through Amazon? But it's the assumption that now that my product could be anywhere, my Nexus has changed. And so that can affect, because Amazon's going to collect tax on that on the front end for you. It's now the other sales that you do that are not through Amazon where you may have to now start collecting tax, or if you're majority exempt, you need to now collect exemption certificates and still file and report the sales that you've done in those areas. So I think the bigger takeaway is just be cautious of knowing when you go into that type of distribution, it could change your Nexus rather quickly.
Okay, we have a question about pricing. Is the pricing of the suite based on the number of states, number of customers, or a combination?
So it's a little bit different. So it's based off of the usage of the product or service. So let's take kind of the 3 main solutions that we offer. So with the calculation engine we call Avatax, it's based on the number of transactions you're doing in your Nexus states. So we'll calculate everything, but if you don't have Nexus in Washington State, we won't count that against your plan. So we really would just need to know how many transactions you're doing in your Nexus footprint. Or potentially, if you have to collect in more states, we can do an estimate of how many you will need over a 12-month period. For returns, it's very straightforward. How many filings are we doing per year. So it's just a straight cost per return. Similar if you want to use our cert capture suite for managing your certificates, it's just a tier based on how many documents we would be managing upon your behalf. So that's kind of how that works, and happy to, typically what we like to do is, do a short 30-minute call if you have interest in pursuing, automation. Happy to learn more about your company. We'd also be the first to tell you if we're a good fit or not. And then, based on your requirements, we can show you how it works and give you pricing as well.
Okay, thank you for that. It looks like all the questions that we've had come in. If you do think of any other questions, please email us and we will get those answered. We want to thank you for taking the time to attend today, and thank you, Mark, for presenting this, and we'll be sending out a recording in the presentation.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.